When a Dubai police squad descended into the basement of an $80 million villa in March 2025, they expected to find a wine cellar or a jewelry vault. Instead, they discovered 7 women in metal cages, measuring 2 by 2 meters each, chained to the walls. All were emaciated, covered in bruises and burns, some unable to stand. One did not respond to voices, staring into space. Another repeated the same word in Russian over and over. On the wall of one of the cells, someone had written in blood in English, "God, save me or kill me." The squad commander, a veteran police officer with 20 years of experience who had seen a lot in his career, ran upstairs and vomited in the courtyard. Later, in an interview with an internal investigation, he said that he thought he had seen everything: murders, drug cartels, terrorists. But this was something else, a hell underground, built by man for man. The owner of the villa was Khalid Al Maktoum, 49 years old, a member of a distant branch of Dubai's ruling family, owner of a construction empire worth $400 million. And the 7 women in the basement had not been there for a day, not even a month. They had been locked up there for 3 years. The story begins in July 2022 in Kiev, Ukraine. The country was living in a state of war that had begun in February. The economy was collapsing, and millions of people were looking for ways to survive or leave. 22-year-old Alina Boyko worked as a waitress in a cafe, earning about $200 a month, barely enough to pay for her room and food. She had a dream of becoming a model, although her height of 172 centimeters was not enough for high fashion, but it was suitable for commercial modeling. She took photos, posted them on Instagram, and hoped that someone would notice her. At the end of July, Alina received a message on Instagram from an account belonging to a modeling agency called Lux Models Dubai. The account looked professional: 20,000 followers, photos of models at shoots, shows, and in studios. The message was in English and Ukrainian, offering work in Dubai, a 3-month contract, and a salary of $3,000 a month, plus accommodation and flights. She was required to come to Dubai for a casting, with the agency paying for her ticket. Alina checked the agency online. She found a website that looked legitimate, with a portfolio, contacts, and reviews. She called the number provided, and a woman with an accent answered, introducing herself as the agency's manager. She confirmed the offer and said that Alina was suitable for advertising shoots and only needed to come, pass the final casting, and sign the contract. The ticket would be sent by email. Alina hesitated. Ukraine was at war, but Dubai seemed like a safe place, rich and far from the conflict. She desperately needed the money. She consulted with her mother, who lived in western Ukraine, in relative safety. Her mother was against it, saying that it could be a scam, human trafficking. But Alina insisted, saying that it was a chance, that the agency looked real, that there was a Ukrainian consulate in Dubai where she could go if there were any problems. The ticket arrived 2 days later, business class, Emirates Airline, departure in a week. Alina packed a small suitcase with clothes, cosmetics, and a portfolio with photos. She flew out of Kiev on August 20th, 2022. It was the last time her mother saw her free. At the same time as Alina, other girls in different European countries received similar messages. 23-year-old Anna Smirnova from Moscow, a student at the Institute of Arts, worked part-time as a photo model. 24-year-old Emma Johnson from Manchester, UK, worked in a bar and dreamed of a career in modeling. 21-year-old Sophie Dupont from Paris, France, was a novice model. 20-year-old Giulia Romano from Milan, Italy, was a fashion university student. 19-year-old Katerina Novakova from Prague, Czech Republic, had just finished school and wanted to earn money for her education. 23-year-old Marina Sokolova, also from Ukraine, from Odessa, worked as a saleswoman in a clothing store. They all received the same offers. They all checked the agency and found it to be legitimate. They all received business class tickets. and they all flew to Dubai between August and December 2022. None of them knew about the others. None of them suspected that the agency was fake, created specifically for this operation. Behind the agency was Khaled Al Maktoum. He was born in 1976 in Dubai to a middle-class family, distant relatives of the ruling dynasty, but without real power or great wealth. His father owned a small construction company, and Khaled studied engineering at a university in the UK before returning to Dubai in the late 1990s to work for his father's company. In 2005, his father died, and Khaled inherited the company. By that time, Dubai was experiencing a construction boom. Skyscrapers were springing up like mushrooms, and money was flowing like water. Khaled proved to be a talented businessman, winning large contracts and building residential complexes, shopping centers, and hotels. By 2015, his company was worth about $200 million, and by 2020, about $400 million. But wealth did not bring satisfaction. Khaled was married and had 3 children, but he was not interested in family life. His wife lived separately in another villa with the children, and they only met at official events. Khaled spent his time with friends, other wealthy businessmen, and members of the royal family, attending private parties where there was alcohol, which is prohibited in Dubai, for Muslims, drugs, and prostitutes. Sometime around 2018, Khaled developed a specific fantasy. In interviews he later gave to investigators after his arrest, he explained that he had always been attracted to European women, especially young, blonde women with fair skin. He said that Eastern women were accessible through prostitution, but European women seemed inaccessible, arrogant, and looked down on Arabs. He wanted power over them, wanted them to be completely at his disposal, with no possibility of refusal, no possibility of leaving. The idea of creating a personal harem of European slaves took root in his mind. He discussed it with several close friends who shared similar fantasies. 6 of them agreed to participate financially and personally. They began planning the operation. The planning took about 2 years. Khaled hired a security consultant, a former Pakistani police officer who worked as a security guard in Dubai, who agreed to help with the organization for a large fee. The consultant developed a kidnapping plan that minimized the risks. Instead of a rough kidnapping on the streets, which would attract the attention of the police, they decided to use deception through a fake modeling agency. They created a professional-looking website, registered a company in Dubai under fictitious names through front men, opened an office in a small building, hired a female secretary who was unaware of the real purpose, and paid her simply to answer phone calls and send tickets. They found potential victims through social media, girls from Eastern Europe and poor regions of Western Europe who posted photos, dreamed of a modeling career, and were in difficult financial situations. They checked their profiles, made sure they were single, had no influential relatives, and were not connected to crime or the police. They sent offers, paid for tickets, and met them at the airport. At the same time, Khaled was building an underground structure under his main villa in the Emirates Hills area, one of the most prestigious and secure areas of Dubai. The villa stood on a plot of 3,000 square meters, a 3-story building with a swimming pool, garden, 8-car garage, and wine cellar. Under the wine cellar, Khaled ordered an additional basement to be dug, 5 meters deep and 200 square meters in area. The work was carried out by migrant workers from Pakistan and Bangladesh who did not speak English, worked illegally, and were paid in cash without documents. They were told that they were building a storage facility for valuables. The work lasted 6 months, from January to June 2022. When it was finished, Khaled fired the crew, paid them, and sent them back to their countries by plane so that they would not remain in Dubai and be able to talk about the project. The underground structure was designed for long-term human habitation. 8 cells, each measuring 2 by 2 meters, with concrete walls 30 centimeters thick, iron doors with locks, and small windows for passing food. Each cell had a concrete bed, a toilet, and a sink. Nothing else. No windows, no natural light. The ventilation was artificial, connected to the villa's ventilation system and disguised so that no additional pipes were visible from the surface. The central room, about 60 square meters in size and simply called the hall, contained a large bed, sofas, tables, a refrigerator with drinks, a sound system, and a television. The walls were lined with sound-absorbing panels to prevent screams from reaching the upper floors. This was where the victims were to be used. A separate room measuring about 20 square meters, called the medical office, contained a couch, cabinets with medicines, instruments, equipment for performing abortions, and basic medical care. Khalid hired a doctor, a Pakistani who was working illegally in Dubai, who agreed to service the basement for a large sum of money without asking any questions. Another room, small, 2 by 2 meters, completely dark, without ventilation, with an iron door, was called the Black Room. It was intended for punishment. The entrance to the basement was through a secret door in the wine cellar. A rack with wine bottles moved aside when a hidden button was pressed, revealing a metal door with a combination lock. Behind the door was a staircase leading down 20 steps to the basement. The door was 10 centimeters thick, made of steel, and soundproof. The entire system was autonomous. Electricity was supplied by a separate generator, disguised in the villa's technical room. The ventilation was connected to the general system, but with filters to prevent odors. Water came from the villa's common system, but through a separate branch that could not be tracked by meters. The sewage system was connected to the common system, but through a deep pipe, so as not to arouse suspicion. Khalid completed construction by July 2022. The basement was ready. All that remained was to fill it. Alina Boyko flew to Dubai on August 20th. The plane landed at the international airport at 10 p.m. Alina passed through passport control without any problems and received a 90-day tourist visa. She picked up her luggage and went out into the arrivals hall. A representative of the agency was supposed to meet her there with a sign. She saw a man, about 40 years old, in a business suit, with a sign with her name on it. She approached him and said hello. The man introduced himself as Ahmed, the agency manager, and said that he would take her to the apartment where she would be staying and that she would come to the office for a casting call the next morning. Alina agreed and followed him to the exit. A black Mercedes S-Class with tinted windows was waiting at the exit. The driver loaded her suitcase into the trunk. Alina sat in the back seat, and Ahmed sat next to her. The car started moving. They drove for about 30 minutes, and Alina looked out the window at Dubai at night. The skyscrapers, the lit-up roads, the luxury she had never seen before. She thought about how lucky she was, how her life would change, how much money she would be able to earn. Then the car turned off the main road, drove through narrow streets, and stopped in front of a tall gate. The gate opened automatically, the car drove in, and the gate closed. Alina became concerned and asked where they were and why the apartments were behind the gate. Ahmed replied that it was a gated community for security. Nothing unusual. The car stopped in front of a villa. Ahmed got out, opened the door for Alina, and gestured for her to go inside. Alina got out and took her suitcase. They went inside. The hall was luxurious, with marble floors, a crystal chandelier, and a wide staircase leading to the second floor. Ahmed said he would show her to her room. He led her not upstairs, but downstairs to the basement. Alina asked why her room was in the basement. Ahmed replied that it was cooler there, and the air conditioning worked better. They went down the stairs to the wine cellar. Ahmed walked over to a rack of wine bottles and pressed a hidden button. The rack moved aside, revealing a metal door. Alina realized that something was wrong. She tried to turn around and run away, but the driver, a massive man, was already standing behind her, blocking her way. Ahmed grabbed her by the arm and dragged her to the open door. Alina screamed and tried to break free. The driver covered her mouth with one hand and held her waist with the other. They dragged her through the door and down the stairs to the basement. Downstairs was a corridor with iron doors on either side. Ahmed opened one of the doors, and the driver threw Alina inside. She fell onto the concrete floor and hit her knee. She tried to get up and run away, but the door had already closed. She heard the sound of the lock. Alina screamed, banged on the door, and demanded to be let out. No one answered. She screamed for 10 minutes, then her voice gave out and she ran out of strength. She sat down on the floor, leaned against the wall, and began to cry. The cell was small, 2 by 2 meters, with concrete walls, ceiling, and floor. There was a single bare light bulb in the ceiling, giving off a dim yellow light. A concrete bed against the wall, hard, without a mattress, only a thin blanket and a pillow. A toilet in the corner, a sink nearby, cold water from the tap. An iron door with a small window measuring 20 by 30 centimeters at chest level, closed with a metal shutter on the outside. Alina spent her first night in a panic, unable to sleep, sitting in the corner, trembling with fear and cold. She didn't understand where she was, what was happening, what they were going to do to her. She thought about her mother, who would worry when she couldn't get through on the phone. She thought that she had fallen into the trap of human traffickers, that they would sell her into prostitution or kill her. In the morning, at about 8 o'clock, the door opened. A metal tray with food was pushed through the window. Boiled rice, stewed vegetables, and a glass of water. A man's voice outside said briefly in English, "Eat." Alina approached the door and tried to see the face outside, but the angle of view did not allow it. She screamed, demanded explanations, begged to be let out. The voice did not answer. The hatch closed. Alina did not eat all day, refusing, thinking that the food might be poisoned or laced with drugs. But by evening, her hunger became unbearable. She drank water and ate a little rice. After a few hours, she realized that there was no poisoning and ate the rest. The second day was similar to the first. Food through the window in the morning, silence, no explanations. Alina screamed, cried, begged, threatened. No one answered. On the third day, in the evening, the cell door opened. Standing in the doorway was a man Alina had never seen before. He was about 50 years old, Arab in appearance, wearing expensive clothes and a watch, smelling of perfume. He looked at her silently, appraisingly. Alina backed away to the far wall and asked in a trembling voice who he was and what he wanted. The man entered the cell and closed the door behind him. He said in accented English that his name was Khaled, that he was the owner of this place, that Alina was now his property, that she would do as he said or be punished. Alina started screaming and tried to rush to the door. Khaled grabbed her by the hair and slapped her hard across the face. Alina fell. He said that this was a warning and that next time would be worse. Khaled raped Alina in that cell, on a concrete bed. She tried to resist, scratching and biting him. He punched her in the stomach and ribs until she stopped resisting from the pain. When he finished, he got up, got dressed, and said that she would be here for a long time, so she'd better get used to it and cooperate. He left, locking the door behind him. Alina lay on the bed, motionless, in shock, with pain throughout her body and blood between her legs. She didn't cry or scream, she just stared at the ceiling, unable to believe that this was real. Over the next few weeks, Khaled came regularly, every 2 or 3 days, used Alina, and left. Sometimes he brought other men, friends who paid him money for access. Alina stopped resisting after several brutal beatings, realizing that it only caused more pain, that it was better to endure, not move, and wait for it to end. 2 months after Alina's arrival, in October 2022, a second girl appeared in the basement. Anna Smirnova from Moscow. She was placed in the neighboring cell. Alina heard her screams when she was brought in, heard her crying at night. She tried to talk to her through the wall, knocked, called out. Anna answered, and they talked in whispers so the guards wouldn't hear. They told each other their stories, cried together, and tried to support each other. In November, a third girl, Emma from England, was brought in. In December, a fourth, Sophie from France. By February 2023, all 8 cells were full. 8 girls from different European countries, all about the same age, all trapped in the same way. Life in the basement was an existence, not a life. The girls were kept in their cells 23 hours a day. Once a day, usually in the morning, they were brought food, rice, vegetables, sometimes chicken or fish, but the portions were small, insufficient. 1 liter of water per person per day. Hunger was constant. Thirst was agonizing. The girls lost weight, and after a few months they were all emaciated, their bones protruding, their faces sunken. Once a day, at different times for each girl, the guards would come, take the girl out of her cell, and lead her to the hall. There, Khaled or one of his friends would be waiting. They used the girl, sometimes one at a time, sometimes several at once. If the girl resisted, screamed, or cried, they beat her and used force. If she obeyed silently, they did not beat her. It lasted from 30 minutes to several hours. Then they returned her to her cell. They were allowed to wash once a week. They were taken to a separate room with a shower, given 5 minutes, cold water, and a bar of soap. They did not change their clothes for months until they turned into rags. There was no medical care. If a girl fell ill, she was left alone and told to endure it. A Pakistani doctor came several times when someone was too sick, gave antibiotics and painkillers, and left. Pregnancies occurred regularly. Khaled and his friends did not use protection. When a girl became pregnant, the doctor would come and perform an abortion right in the basement, on a couch in the medical office, without anesthesia, only local pain relief. The girls screamed in pain and lost consciousness. After a few days, they returned to their usual routine, with no time to recover. Psychological control was systematic. Khaled developed a system of punishments to maintain fear and obedience. Refusal to cooperate during use was punished by deprivation of food for 48 hours and beating with a stun gun, a self-defense device purchased in a store which delivered painful electric shocks, leaving burns on the skin. Attempts to escape were punished publicly. The girls tried to escape twice. The first attempt was 3 months after Alina's arrival, when a guard inadvertently left the cell door ajar after taking another girl out. Alina slipped out, ran down the corridor, and tried to find a way out. But the basement was a maze. There were many doors, all locked. She was caught within a minute. Khaled ordered all 7 girls who were in the basement at that moment to be brought into the hall. He forced them to watch as he beat Alina on the back with a leather belt, 10 blows, each leaving a bloody stripe. Alina screamed, fell, got up. The other girls cried, turned away, but were forced to watch under threat that they would be next. The second attempt was a year later, in February 2024. Marina, one of the Ukrainian girls, found a piece of metal from a broken bed, sharpened it on the concrete floor, and hid it. When the guard came to take her out, she hit him in the neck with the shard. The guard fell, bleeding profusely. Marina grabbed the keys, opened her cell, and ran to open the others. She managed to open 3 before a second guard with a gun arrived, fired into the air, and ordered her to stop. Khaled was furious. The dead guard was his relative, his nephew. He ordered all 8 girls to be brought to the hall and Marina to be tied to a table. He took a metal rod and heated it over a gas burner. He burned Marina's skin on her stomach, chest, and thighs, leaving deep burns. Marina screamed until she lost her voice and passed out from the pain. The other girls cried, sobbed, and begged him to stop. Khaled didn't stop until he had inflicted 20 burns. Marina survived, but the burns became infected. The doctor treated her for months, and the scars remained forever. After that, no one else tried to escape. Protests, cries, and demands to be released were punished with isolation in a black room. A small cell, 2 by 2 meters, without light, without ventilation, an iron door, complete darkness and silence. The girl was locked up there for a week, sometimes longer. She was fed once every 2 days and given a minimum of water. After a few days of isolation, the girls began to hallucinate, hear voices, and see things that weren't there. When they were released, they were psychologically broken, stopped resisting, and obeyed silently. Within 3 years, the psyche of all 8 girls was destroyed. Alina Boyko, who at first screamed, resisted, and begged, became apathetic and silent after a year, carrying out orders mechanically, without emotion. 2 years later, she tried to kill herself by making a noose out of a sheet and hanging herself from a ventilation pipe. The guards found her in time, took her down, and resuscitated her. After that, Alina fell into a catatonic state, did not speak, did not respond to external stimuli, sat in the corner of the cell, and stared at the wall. She had to be force-fed and made to swallow. Anna Smirnova from Moscow lost her mind after a year and a half. She began talking to invisible people, having conversations with voices that only she could hear. Sometimes she laughed for no reason. Sometimes she cried for hours. When she was taken out into the hall, she did not understand where she was or what was happening, saying that it was a dream and that she would wake up soon. Emma Johnson from England kept her sanity longer than the others, tried to support the others, saying that they had to hold on, that they would be found and saved. But after 2 years, she broke down too. She wrote a phrase in English on the wall of her cell in blood: "God, save me or kill me." She took the blood from a wound on her wrist, which she had inflicted on herself by tearing her skin with her fingernails. The phrase remained on the wall. The guards did not wipe it off. Khaled said it was a good reminder for others that there was no hope. 19-year-old Katerina Novikova from Prague, the youngest, was the most psychologically fragile. She cried every night, called for her mother, asked God for death. After a year, she stopped crying, became indifferent, did everything she was told without resistance, without emotion. Her body moved, but inside, there was nothing left. In December 2024, Khaled organized a special party for a group of wealthy businessmen from Saudi Arabia. 10 men, each paying $50,000 for access to all 8 girls for one night. They brought all the girls into the hall, undressed them, and ordered them to serve the guests. The night lasted 8 hours, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 10 men used 8 girls repeatedly, taking turns, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time. The girls were exhausted, sick, and tormented. Several lost consciousness and were revived with cold water, only to be used again. Katerina Novikova did not survive the night. At 4 in the morning, she began to bleed internally from injuries to her pelvis. The bleeding did not stop. No doctor was called because the party was still going on, and Khaled did not want to interrupt it. Katerina bled to death by 6 in the morning, on the floor of the hall, in a pool of blood, surrounded by indifferent drunk men. When the guests left, Khaled ordered the body to be removed. The guards took Katerina to the medical office, where there was a small oven for burning medical waste. They burned the body, turning it to ashes. The ashes were washed down the drain. Nothing remained of Katerina Novikova except the memories of the 7 remaining girls who had witnessed her death. The 7 continued to exist in the basement. Alina was in a catatonic state, Anna was insane, and the rest were apathetic, depressed, and hopeless. Khaled and his friends continued to come regularly, use them, and leave. The daily routine continued month after month. In March 2025, an event occurred that led to their rescue. There was a problem with the water supply in Khalid's villa, a leak in the basement system, and the water pressure was dropping. Khalid was forced to call in a repair crew, even though he did not want to let strangers in. But the problem was serious. Water was flooding the technical basement and could damage the electrical systems. The repair crew arrived on March 4th, 4 Indian workers, plumbing specialists. Khalid ordered the guards to watch them and not allow them to wander around the house. The workers went down to the technical basement and began to look for the source of the leak. They worked for several hours, checking the pipes, walls, and floor. One of the workers, a man named Rajesh, about 35 years old, who had lived in Dubai for 10 years, separated from the group and went to check the far end of the basement, where the pipes led to the wine cellar. He stopped at the wall and listened. A faint sound came through the concrete wall. A woman's voice, like crying or moaning. Very quiet, but distinct. Rajesh pressed his ear against the wall and listened. Definitely a woman's voice, a repetitive sound, as if someone was crying or praying. It was strange because, according to the house plans, there should be nothing behind that wall, only soil. Rajesh returned to the foreman and told him what he had heard. The foreman listened too and confirmed that he could hear it. They decided to tell the security guard who was watching the work. The guard turned pale when he heard about the sound and said it was nothing, that the ventilation was making noise, an echo from the neighboring villa. But the workers insisted that the sound was distinct, human. The foreman called his boss, the owner of the renovation company, and explained the situation. The boss was a cautious man and knew that there were cases of human trafficking and migrant slave labor in Dubai. He decided to report it to the police, just in case, so as not to be accused of complicity if something illegal was going on. He called the Dubai police anonymously, reported strange sounds of a woman's voice coming from the wall of a villa in the Emirates Hills area, and gave the address. The police accepted the report, although they were skeptical, as such calls often turned out to be mistakes or pranks. But the procedure required verification, so they sent a patrol. The patrol arrived at the villa an hour later. 2 officers, a sergeant and a private, knocked on the gate. The security guard opened it and asked what was wrong. The officers explained that they had received a report of unusual sounds coming from the house and needed to check it out. The guard tried to refuse, saying that everything was fine and there were no problems. The officers insisted that they had the right to enter based on the report. The guard called Khalid, who was in the office at the time. Khalid ordered the guard not to let the police in, to say that the owner was away and would return in the evening, and that they could come back later. But the officers did not agree, saying that they would wait or return with a warrant if they were refused. Khalid realized that the delay would arouse suspicion, so he ordered them to be let in, but not to be allowed down to the basement, only to be shown the upper floors. The officers entered and inspected the first, second, and third floors. Everything looked normal, a luxurious villa with no signs of anything illegal. They asked if they could inspect the basement. The security guard said that there was only a wine cellar and a utility room where repairmen were currently working. Nothing of interest. The officers insisted. They went down to the technical basement where the repairmen were working. The officers asked to be shown the place where they had heard the sound. The workers led them to the wall. The officers put their ears to it and listened. At first, they heard nothing. Then one of them caught a faint sound, like a moan. The officer asked the guard what was behind the wall. The guard replied that there was nothing, just soil and foundation. The officer knocked on the wall. The sound was dull, but not like solid concrete, more like a hollow space behind a layer. The officer called for backup on the radio, reporting that there was a suspicion of a hidden room behind the wall, and that a detailed inspection was required. 20 minutes later, 4 more officers and a detective arrived. The detective examined the wall and ordered the repairmen to inspect the pipes leading through it, and trace their route. The repairman found that the pipes did not go into the ground, but somewhere down into a hidden room. The detective ordered them to find the entrance. They searched the basement and found a door to the wine cellar. They went in and examined the wine racks. The detective noticed that one rack was not bolted to the wall like the others, but stood on wheels. He ordered it to be moved. The security guard tried to prevent this, saying that it was private property and a warrant was needed. The detective replied that a warrant was not required if there was suspicion of people being held captive, which was grounds for immediate entry. They moved the rack and found a metal door with a combination lock behind it. They ordered the guard to open it. The guard refused, saying he did not know the code. The detective ordered them to break it open. The officers brought tools and began to break the lock. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Behind the door was a staircase leading down, 20 steps, dimly lit by light bulbs in the wall. The detective and 3 officers went down, weapons at the ready. Below was a corridor with iron doors on either side. The detective shouted, "Is anyone here?" There was a few seconds of silence. Then a faint female voice replied in English, "Help! Please help us." The detective ran to the door from which the voice was coming. The door was locked from the outside. He unlocked it and threw the door open. In the cell, a young woman was sitting on a cot, emaciated, in dirty clothes, with long tangled hair and bruises on her face and arms. She stared at the detective with wide eyes, unable to believe that this was real. The detective asked who she was and how she got there. The woman replied in broken English that her name was Emma, that she was from England, that she had been kidnapped almost 3 years ago, that there were 6 other women there, and that one had died. The detective ordered the officers to open all the doors. They opened 8 cells and found women in 7 of them. All were alive, but in terrible condition. One did not respond, sitting in a corner, staring at the wall. Another muttered something in Russian, talking to invisible people. The rest cried, begged for help, and pleaded for doctors to be called. The detective called an ambulance, rescue services, and backup. Within 20 minutes, the villa was surrounded by police cars, ambulances, and television crews who had heard about the discovery on police scanners and rushed to the scene. 7 women were evacuated on stretchers and taken to the hospital under guard in ambulances. Doctors began examinations and found signs of prolonged malnutrition, dehydration, multiple old and new injuries, burns, fractures that had healed without medical attention, infections, and psychological disorders. All were placed in separate wards under constant supervision by psychiatrists and therapists. Khaled al-Maktoum, upon learning of the raid, attempted to flee. He left his office and headed for the airport with $2 million in cash in his bag and a fake passport in the name of a Saudi Arabian citizen. But the police had already issued an alert, and the airport had been warned. Khaled was arrested in the terminal 2 hours after the raid on the villa, when he was trying to check in for a flight to Riyadh. Khaled's arrest became an international sensation. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and all the world's media showed footage of the raid, photos of the basement, cameras, and chains. The UAE government issued a statement saying that the criminal would be punished to the full extent of the law, that such actions did not represent the country's values, and that the victims would be given all necessary assistance. The investigation took 4 months. Khaled initially denied everything, claiming that the women had come voluntarily, worked as prostitutes under contract, and that he had not kidnapped them. But the evidence was irrefutable. The testimonies of all 7 women, which coincided in detail, medical examinations confirming violence and torture, airport security camera footage showing the women arriving and being met by Khaled's men, records of financial transactions, payments to friends for access to the women, and correspondence on phones and computers. The investigation established that over 3 years, Khaled had earned about $3 million by selling access to the victims to his friends and clients. 6 of his Sheikh friends were arrested, all confessed, and testified against Khaled in exchange for reduced sentences. The trial began in August 2025. Khaled was charged with the kidnapping of 8 people, human trafficking, rape, torture, and the murder of Katerina Novikova. The trial was closed, with victims testifying via video link from hospitals, without appearing in court, to avoid further trauma. The verdict was handed down in October. Khaled al-Maktoum was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to death for the murder of Katerina Novikova and to life imprisonment for kidnapping, rape, and torture. The sentence is final, with no right of appeal. The execution is scheduled for the end of 2025 by firing squad. 6 accomplices received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years in prison, depending on their degree of involvement. The guards, a Pakistani doctor, and the secretary of the fake agency were arrested and sentenced to terms ranging from 5 to 12 years. The UAE government paid each of the 7 surviving women $3 million in compensation, covered all medical expenses, arranged psychological assistance, provided visas for permanent residents in the UAE, or assistance in returning to their home countries with subsequent support. All 7 chose to return home. Alina Boyko returned to Ukraine to her mother, underwent treatment at a psychiatric clinic in Kiev, partially regained her ability to speak and interact, but remained with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and suicidal thoughts. A year after her release, in April 2026, she committed suicide by taking a large dose of sleeping pills. She left a note to her mother. "I can't live with the memories. Forgive me. I tried." Anna Smirnova returned to Russia and was placed in a psychiatric hospital in Moscow, where she remains to this day. She has not regained her sanity, continues to talk to voices, does not recognize her relatives, and lives in her own reality. Doctors believe that a full recovery is unlikely. Emma Johnson returned to England, is undergoing long-term therapy, and lives with her parents in Manchester. She is gradually recovering, has started volunteering at an organization that helps victims of human trafficking, and is trying to turn her experience into a strength to help others. She does not give public interviews. It is too difficult for her to talk about what she has been through. Sophie Dupont, Julia Romano, and Marina Sokolova have returned to their countries, are all undergoing long-term therapy, and are trying to rebuild their lives. None of them have married or had children. They all live with their parents or alone, avoid men, suffer from nightmares and panic attacks, and are afraid of enclosed spaces and darkness. The relatives of Katerina Novikova from Prague received compensation and official confirmation of her death. Her body was never found. Her ashes were washed down the drain, but the court ruled that she had been murdered based on the testimony of the survivors. Her parents erected a symbolic grave in a cemetery in Prague and regularly bring flowers. The story caused an international outcry and led to tighter controls on modeling agencies, especially those that recruit girls from Eastern Europe to work in the Middle East. Several other similar cases were uncovered in the following months in various Gulf countries. Dozens of women were freed, and dozens of criminals were arrested. But for the 7 survivors and the relatives of the deceased Katerina, justice did not bring relief. Money did not bring back the lost years, erase the memories, or heal the wounds. 3 years in an underground prison destroyed these women's lives forever. Alina Boyko is dead, having committed suicide a year after her release. Anna Smirnova lives in a psychiatric hospital, having lost her mind. The rest are trying to exist, day after day, fighting the demons of the past that never go away. Khaled al-Maktoum was executed by firing squad in December 2025 in a Dubai prison. He did not utter his last words, did not express remorse, did not ask for forgiveness. He died as he had lived, heartless, cruel, believing himself entitled to own other people, to use them, to destroy them. His villa was confiscated. The basement was filled with concrete, and the building was demolished. A public park was built on the site. None of the local residents wanted to live there. The place was cursed by the memory of what had happened underground. The story of the Sheikh's underground prison became a warning to young women around the world. Don't trust offers that seem too good to be true. Check employers carefully. Never fly to another country without safety guarantees, without contact with the consulate, without people who know where you are. But warnings don't always help. Every year, thousands of women fall into the traps of human traffickers. Some are rescued. Many are not. 7 women were rescued from Khaled Al Maktoum's basement, only because a repair worker happened to hear screams through the wall and decided to report it. If not for this coincidence, they would still be there, or already dead. Court documents, victim statements, medical reports, all exist in the archives of the UAE law enforcement agencies. But many similar stories never become known. Somewhere right now, in basements, secret rooms, isolated buildings, women and children are being held in slavery, suffering, dying in silence. And the world keeps turning, oblivious to their cries.